Yeah. As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'm gonna roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road, let's camera action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH-LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
All right, salutations, Connecticut. We got a show for you today. There's been a radical change going on in the state all year long. And I've attended many of these rallies and events, and they're uplifting and they're moving. In 2013, I was in Selma with Reverend Barber, and he talked about fusion politics. He said, we must build a fusion politics coalition. And so what I love is we got a political coalition made of labor, community organizations, faith groups that set out to change the structure in Connecticut. So recovery for all people, get ready for it. They're not going away, no. And they are changing the narrative about the need for prospects for progressive revenue in the state. Because Connecticut, we don't want to tax our billionaires. We got a regressive income tax, where the poor pay a higher percentage. That doesn't exist in any other state in the nation. And today we want to talk about the coalition's origins, accomplishments, and future. And let's begin. What I'll do is I'll follow along. I'm not certain if you can see John, Norma, Megan, Puya. We'll follow along in that line for today. And at first, what will happen is I just want you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you represent and passion, and keep it short because we got a nice conversation coming. Okay, John O'Connor, you're up first.
Okay, hello everyone. My name's John O'Connor. I'm a member of CSU AUP Council. I teach at Central in New Britain. I've been involved in AUP for I think over a decade. And I'm a proud member. AUP is a proud member of the Recovery for All Coalition. And I've found what has happened in the last few months to be incredibly inspiring and important.
Perfect. Norma, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Norma Martinez-Hosang. I'm a longtime labor community organizer. Started in California, then in Oregon, and now here in Connecticut. I'm very, very excited about the work that Recovery for All has been doing, because I think it's the right approach to really bridge and bring and connect labor community faith organizations that have a similar vision for where we want to live and where we want to grow old and where we want our kids to live. So happy to be here today. Thank you, Jesse, for inviting us.
Thank you. All right, Megan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan Fountain. I am for 14 years member, organizer, and coordinator at ULA, Unidad Latina en Acción. We are a grassroots organization based in New Haven since 2002. And we are a voice organizing the power of immigrant workers in New Haven and in the state of Connecticut. A lot of the folks that we represent are the excluded workers, the workers who are excluded from basic labor rights and protections because of their immigrant status or because of the jobs that they do. So glad to be here this morning to talk about the Recovery for All Coalition.
All right, perfect. And Puya, could you introduce yourself? And then I'm going to start off with you, so you can already start thinking when you introduce yourself. You could tell us about the origins of this, because in Connecticut, what the public might not know, that statewide, like every budget, we come together with something for a little while, and then it disappears. And I'm hoping, I'm praying that Recovery for All doesn't disappear, keeps us together. We want a new name next time. We got the coalition here. So take us to the origin, sir, and the mission.
Great. And Jesse, I see Pastor Wade just hopped on.
Oh, okay, we'll right after you. We'll pull him in.
Great. So, hey everybody, I'm Puya. I was born in Norwich, raised in Mansfield. Now I live in New Haven. I'm the campaign director for the Recovery for All Coalition. And I'm really thrilled to be here for this conversation and with such a wonderful group of friends and folks. And thanks, Jesse, for having us on. So just a quick word of introduction about the coalition, how we originated and who we are. Recovery for All is a statewide coalition right now uniting 46 organizations across Connecticut. As Jesse pointed out, that's 46 labor, community, and faith organizations. Taken together, we represent hundreds of thousands of residents across Connecticut. And we came together over the last year to pursue a common mission. The mission is we want to lead a long-term struggle to eliminate our state's extreme inequities, the systemic disparities of race, of class, of gender that have been growing for as long as I've been alive in Connecticut. We want to build a kind of state where every resident has a chance to survive and grow, not just the wealthy few. That means a child growing up in the inner city in New Haven needs to have the same life chance as a child growing up down the highway in places like Darien and New Canaan and Greenwich, or a child growing up on the north end of Hartford having the same life chances as a child growing up in suburban Glastonbury or Avon. So let's be crystal clear. Connecticut is the wealthiest state in the wealthiest country in the history of planet Earth, but it's also the most unequal. We have extraordinary disparities. So what we're saying as a coalition is in the wealthiest state, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, there's no good reason why we can't fully fund education, healthcare, housing, social services, and so much more. Again, for all residents in Connecticut, not just a few over here, but for every single person, regardless of their race or their zip code or their income level, et cetera. So there's a lot more to talk about, but that's just
no problem.
1 minute intro.
Yeah, you lead us right into Pastor Wade. You are perfect right now because we want to get to that moral obligation because Connecticut never has a moral budget. I always look at that as an immoral document. You know, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, sir, and give us a little bit of that pastoral fire because I'm old school. Love it. Amen. I'll be shouting from the rafters.
So much, Jesse. Thank you for having us here today. Certainly appreciate it. My name is Pastor Rodney Wade. I serve as lead pastor serving that parish now for 11 years. I'm not a product of Connecticut. I'm an implant. Connecticut has now become my home. And so when we think about Connecticut, of two states, right? A state where you see people talking about it being the wealthiest state in the country. But the reality is there are parts of this state who are suffering, are dealing with all types of challenges, all types of issues, all types of obstacles, and to simply try to glaze over those issues, symbolic stuff, this becomes problematic state that's full of wealth and power. And those who are in power refusing to be courageous and look at their buddies and look at their friends, say, you have to pay. Connecticut will no longer be a safe haven for you to just collect dollars without sharing some of that wealth for the greater good. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're in Greenwich or Waterbury, where I live, everybody wants the same thing. We want to have robust schools, communities that are thriving. We want to have economic resources. We want to be able to provide, right, for our families. The challenge of Connecticut, specifically coming out of the pandemic, is to ask ourselves, what type of state are we going to be going forward? We're going to be a state where we, in fact, look after the least of these. Will we continue to pat our back and say, hey, we're the wealthiest state in the union? At the end of the day, what does that really mean? If you're not giving back, if you're not helping in a real, meaningful, I think the challenge of this state, of the powers to be as we go.
Perfect. Megan, when I was at one of the rallies, I was in New Haven, and we had some really great speakers that were labor activists. I think some of them were hotel workers and food service workers. And John and I were there, John O'Connor, and to hear people say they just want sick days. They know, sick days, tell us a little bit about that battle, because sometimes being a longtime labor activist, I forget that the struggle for labor, we're diminishing in union membership. We're not increasing. And here we have the real essential community. There were a lot of healthcare workers there. This was during COVID. And I just remember all of that. But could you tell us a little bit about the experience of those workers who are just struggling for sick days? I mean, 15, I'm like, we need 25 in order to live. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I wish it were 15.
Yeah.
What we discovered during the pandemic, what I discovered, because again, I was ignorant, is that in Connecticut, there are many workers who don't even have the right to take one paid sick day. In the best case scenario, we have a paid sick day law in Connecticut where you have the right to take 5 days off. Paid sick days to see the doctor, or to take your child to the doctor, or to stay home so that you don't infect your coworkers. But that law is only for businesses with 50 employees or more. So if you work for a company with smaller than 50 employees, or if you are somebody who provides childcare or who cares for an elder person in their home, you may be working for a company of one. So you are not covered by the paid sick day law in Connecticut. So the pandemic was a wake-up call. The members of ULA said, hey, we are essential for this state. We are the ones, all of a sudden, our work has been invisible. It has been undervalued. And now the politicians are saying that we're essential. We are cleaning the supermarkets at night. We are cleaning the schools and the universities. We're cleaning the hospitals. We are exposing ourselves to the virus. We're growing the food. We're caring for children. We're caring for elders. We don't have the luxury to stay home. We can't work remotely. And all of a sudden, you're calling us essential, yet we don't even have the right to take a day off to go to the doctor. We don't have the right to collect unemployment in Connecticut because we're undocumented immigrants. And so we're paying into the system because most undocumented immigrants pay taxes. In Connecticut, undocumented immigrants pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in state and local taxes. They pay sales tax. They pay property tax. But they also have taxes taken out of their paycheck And then when they're in a crisis, when we're all in a public health crisis, these folks cannot collect unemployment all of a sudden, even though they've been paying into unemployment. They can't take off a paid family leave, even though they've been paying into that pool of insurance. They were excluded from the federal stimulus checks. So without any safety net, they had to risk their lives and go out there and work. Meanwhile, these immigrant workers didn't have any health insurance either. And that was one of the fights that this Recovery for All Coalition took on. Connecticut needs to open the Husky health insurance to all residents of Connecticut who are contributing to this economy, who are doing the essential work for the state without any healthcare coverage, who are paying into the system without the basic human right to healthcare. And I think that's one of the great accomplishments of this coalition this year, is making that conversation happen about who is essential, and also the fact that healthcare should be a human right, not about how much money you have in your pocket, not about where you were born, but a human right for all residents of this state. Because when one worker is sick, when one worker can't take the day off to go to the doctor, when one worker has no social safety net, we're all less safe.
And let's make this clear. These are our hospitals, our schools, our supermarkets. They're taking care of our parents, our grandparents, our sick, our children. That's important. Well, Norma, what's your take on this? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the very exciting things that we were able to do through the coalition over the last 6 to 8 months is exactly like bringing, when you see who's here, you know, John O'Connor, who works as a college professor, Megan, who works with immigrant residents in New Haven and across the state, and you have Pastor Wade, is that it is something different. And I really like what you said, Jesse, that we're here to stay. We're here to continue that work. Because just as what you're talking about, you know, what Megan pointed out, these families also, you know, immigrant families have children, have dreams of their children going to community colleges, going to state universities. And unless we have a robust and well-funded public sector, a well-funded public sector, that, you know, it's all intertwined. And so I think as we fight for healthcare improvements, as we fight for rights for all workers, whether in labor unions or workers that don't have, are not represented by a labor union, we're also thinking about the role of public education, the role of public higher education, which is one of the only ways that some of our Black and brown and poor students have some access to that higher education. And as a coalition, we need to continue to paint that picture because it matters, and it matters to people's everyday life. So it's exciting to be here and be talking about these issues, and to know that we have great plans moving ahead to continue to share these stories across with everybody. So stories of what's happening with the workers, but also what's happening with students who graduate with a lot of debt, and how that isn't fair, and how that pulls us all down as well. So it's good to be here and to be pointing these things out, and to continue to think about how we're going to continue that work.
Excellent. So, I want to get the idea, because I'm being in Connecticut. I'm a New Jersey person, transported here. So Pastor Wade, they'll keep you. They'll like us. But some 23 years now, I think I've been here. But I've seen these moments. The last time it was all hands on deck. It was the Do Justice Coalition. And there's something about the Recovery for All that reminds me what being a longtime activist, I understand that this is the work that never ends. So I'm wondering, could you tell us about where does the coalition go? Where do we want to be next year, the year after that? And what are the steps forward? Because I'm excited. I'm a firm believer, brother. Yes.
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. First, one thing I want to underscore here, I just want to reemphasize the point that Megan is making. Right now, most people in Connecticut are facing an enormous struggle to survive, rebuild their lives, raise their families. They're grappling with low wages, unemployment, the threat of eviction, lack of decent health care, decent education. And these same working people are the working people who have been struggling for decades. This is not new. We're talking about working people of every color, but especially Black and brown workers, especially immigrant workers. These are folks who have been working and struggling long before the coronavirus ever appeared in 2020. As we've heard time and again, this global crisis we're experiencing right now has just revealed and exacerbated disparities that have been widening for years. And I want to mention the other side of this coin. Over the last year and a half, we've had hundreds of thousands of people in Connecticut who have lost their jobs, right? Who have struggled, many who have even lost their lives. And in the same period of time, Connecticut's billionaires seized an additional $12.6 billion in additional wealth. I should have told the listeners at home to sit down before I said that. But let me repeat that. At the same time that hundreds of thousands of people are struggling, 14 individuals seized $13 billion in additional wealth just in the last year and a half alone. Something has got to give. The situation in Connecticut right now is morally obscene. And so the accomplishments that this coalition has made over the last 6 months, it really is just the beginning. We are committed to undertaking this fight, not just over the next year, not just into the next budget session in 2023, but over the next decade and beyond. We want to say in this decade, the 2020s, this is going to be the decade for a Connecticut for all, not just Connecticut for the few. Because for the last few decades, the state government has been enacting public policies that either ignore or worsen the systemic disparities in Connecticut. And so we're talking about a fundamental change. We want to start making laws and making budgets with the explicit purpose of ending systemic inequities in Connecticut once and for all. That has got to be the number one goal of policymakers in Hartford. So again, it's not just a struggle about 1 year or one legislative session or one campaign. What we're trying to do in this coalition is we want to unite as many people as possible. We want to unite as many organizations as possible in Connecticut because we know we share this common vision. We know that there are folks all across the state who say, you know what? There can be a better way. We don't want to continue down this path of extreme inequity. It's not right. And so we're going to band together and we're going to fight at the Capitol. We're going to fight at our workplaces. We're going to fight in the streets and in our communities. And we're going to build an even bigger and better coalition so that we can enact a fair tax structure, number one. But that's just really the start. Because again, this is about adopting state budgets that are going to bring about a more equitable Connecticut. That's what we believe.
Yeah, fair tax structure. Whose roads are Amazon using? Who's clearing the snow off those roads? Who are maintaining those roads? Who are protecting their businesses when the fires come? When there's robberies, whatever happens, who's taking care of them? Who's building the hospitals by them? Who's maintaining the universities for them over there? Yeah, they use the same services we do. There's no pull themselves up by the bootstrap. But Pastor Wade, I'd like to get into this. I want you to, I hope, that you give us this understanding of a moral sense of an obligation. The poor are not our burden. They are our salvation. They are our redemption. And let me tell you, I know about the poor because I was the homeless kid. I know about being homeless and your mother goes to work 6 days a week and you're still homeless. I know what it's like to go to live off food stamps. I know what it's like for that stuff. And it's not just a white thing, it's a black thing, it's a Latin thing, it's an Asian thing. And poverty to me is our greatest sin. What do you think, Pastor?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Recovery for All did over the course of these months, in a real concrete, started not only to change the narrative, also change because too often having these type of conversations were perceived as being taboo. You don't tax, tax is wrong. Then they would throw out arguments around, oh, if you tax, people leave. And that's been debunked over and over and over. So I liken it to this. And oftentimes I use this in terms of Black and brown people. If the lion doesn't tell their story, the hunter gets all the glory. And so what has been happening in this state, rich, the powerful, the privileged have been telling the story of the lion. But now the lions are saying, no, we're going to tell our own story. Craft our own stories. We're going to lay out our own stories. We're going to talk about the value that we bring to the state, to what happens into the state, what makes the state go around. And so during the pandemic, you're essential. You're essential, signs up everywhere. But then when it came time to set forth policies and help those same people, these arguments came about, well, you're not really that valuable. But folk like 1199 and others who supported that work said, nope, that's not true. You're not going to do this to us again. We're going to tell our story about the worth and the penalties and the price that we paid to keep Connecticut thriving. And I think that's what Recovery for All is doing. We're pulling people together and in a real, tangible, and meaningful way, allowing them to tell their story that speaks to their plight, but also will change policy. I think that's the critical piece, because here's the thing, too often, if I could speak about Black and brown people, they would tell us, oh, in order to get this, you got to be nice to it. I say that's a lie. I say that's not true. Relationships are important, but I'm not just interested in going out and having coffee and having tea with you. If you are not interested in changing policies, practices that don't benefit the least of these. And so I think that's what's happening in this state. This is why this work has been so powerful, because we found an avenue where we had all of this common ground. We were able to share it in a very succinct way. And I'm just excited about what's going to happen going.
Love it. Agree fully with you. Reverend Ralph Abernathy once told me, he said, you know what the civil rights movement was about? We ended the go along to get along, because we were not going along. We were being beaten down. And he saw the civil rights as an immense activist, a powerful movement. And we were at a luncheon with him. And what I loved was, we all said, wow, it must have been amazing in '63 at the speech. And I was a little kid and I was there. So everybody said, Jesse, hey, he was there. And I'm like, I was 8 years old. I don't remember much. I was with my grandfather. But the thing was, we were saying, wow, it must have been a moment. And he said, no, that moment was built when Dr. King was appointed a minister in Montgomery. It was when we were together. It was when Roser was our secretary at the meeting, not on the bus. It was when there was only 3 of us in the room, 4 of us in the room, 12 of us in the room. We said the big moments were really the little moments that made those moments. And that's the way I see Recovery for All. I want to take us to something, because America may not understand us, And I'm hoping that John, you can help us with this because we're both familiar with another country, Ireland, that has a social network. They have billionaires, you know, the UK and Ireland, they have billionaires. One of them went up into space yesterday, you know, they have billionaires, but healthcare is universal. In Ireland, if you try to evict someone, they're going to tear you apart. They don't allow eviction. And it was just a matter of I remember from my relatives when they were poor and had really no protections, but something happened in the past 40 years. So John, what did they do differently in that EU place? You know, I mean, it's not perfect. It's got systemic racism, structural racism. It's got all of the stuff going on there, but it has healthcare for all. Uh, you know, my aunt got a pension and she never worked. She got the widow's pension and she got her husband's pension. How's that? You know, and free buses and trains from 55 on. If you're 55, and then I could go with her because anybody, if she traveled, she needed a care worker. And it was any relative, any nephew, any daughter that wanted to go on a trip with her. But John, is there anything different? Can we do something different? Can we still tax people in a fair way? And can we still have billionaires? Take us there, Dr. O'Connell.
Well, I have no problem saying that the billionaires have got to go. They don't do anything. They have no redeeming social value at all. They're far too often parasites, and you know, it's the people who create value in society, workers, that basically make society go. The only thing I would sort of say, Jesse, I mean, if you think about Europe, I mean, many of the sort of social rights that they have, or the welfare systems that they were able to sort of produce or create through struggle, I mean, those things are under assault as well. Actually, Ireland and a whole bunch of European countries trying to forge coalitions like Connecticut has tried to create. And I would just sort of say that, you know, when you think about the Recovery for All coalition, you think about the sort of moment that it emerged, right? Yes, there was this crisis, this pandemic, this economic contraction. I mean, had a summer of upheaval after the Floyd murder. And, you know, crises are important because they can help us see things, right? They can help us sort of see what's going on in Connecticut prior to the virus. But we also have to be very aware, right? I mean, who pays for crises, right? I mean, I think that's why the coalition is important going forward. You know, for the most part, it's working people that have paid for the crises in the past, right? I mean, the only time that didn't happen was maybe coming out of the Great Depression and the war, and that was largely because people were on the streets, I would argue, right? I mean, we talk about the New Deal and things like that, but the fact of the matter is that those policy shifts only came about because people sort of pushed it. And I would just also sort of say that when we think a little bit about, you know, Connecticut's future here, you know, I think what is cool about the coalition, what is important about the coalition is that it really, yeah, it has this sort of economic component to it. It wants to talk about progressive taxation and what's progressive revenue going forward, but it also sort of turns on a real simple question or point for me, and that is, you know, do you care about your neighbors? Do you care about your neighbors' children? And it seems to me that that is what is really important about what is happening, right? Bringing labor together, bringing community organizations together, and bringing faith groups together, right? It really is about Connecticut's future, right? I mean, where is it going, right? Where is it going? And so yeah, you know, Europe has certain things, but they're under assault as well. But I think the solution to it is what we're trying to do here in Connecticut.
And I would say what's common. We've got to put the elephant in the room. The wealth of Europe, wealth of America, the wealth of Connecticut, whose insurance industry insured every slave ship that ever sailed the seas. I mean, if we want one passed away, that, you know, the lions want to tell the story, not the hunters. And we look at critical race theory right now under attack. What do they want to do? They do not want people to know their past, to know their history, to know how powerful and beautiful they are, or where this wealth came from. So I like everyone to also, because the battle to me is yes, it's what John said. It's, are we going to be a caring nation? Are we going to be a dog eat dog nation? Are we going to be the same old, same old? And it's not just, you know, this to me is racism 101. We have built we have built the wealth of the West on the backs of immigrants, on free Africans who were enslaved, brutalized for 400 years, and still on that. Native Americans were on their land right now. I mean, the brutality of it. So I'd like to get, I think the next question, I'd like everyone to take a little bit, contribute to, where does the fight against racism come into Recovery Y'all? And maybe we'll start with Puya. You're the go-to man. They kept telling me, he's the one. Go to the Facebook page. He's gonna send you an email. Over there. And he usually ended our rallies, right? All right. Where does an anti-racism campaign fit into Recovery for All? Go ahead, sir. It's a tough one.
Well, that is the key question that all of us need to be considering in this moment when Americans nationwide are once again facing a reckoning over our history of 500 years of racial oppression. And I think there are a few ways to answer that from our perspective at Recovery for All. First of all, we need to recognize the role that state budgets can play in either entrenching, okay, or mitigating structural racism. Let me be a little bit clearer. Over the last half century, we've been enacting public policies that disinvest in communities of color, take resources away from communities of color. And anyone who lives in a community like New Haven, like I do in Connecticut, can see this, you know, on a daily basis. Underfunded schools, underfunded healthcare facilities, lack of decent jobs. So this systematic disinvestment in communities of color, this is one of the biggest signs of the way structural racism works in America today. Okay, it means we're going to put more dollars, for instance, in policing and incarcerating Black residents in Connecticut, but we're not going to invest in education. We're not going to invest in healthcare or social services or housing. So what we want to do is we want to start passing policies. We want to start enacting state budgets that are going to consciously invest in communities of color. So we're not talking about taking resources away. We're talking about dramatically expanding the resources that every community requires in order to grow and in order to flourish. Okay. So if you're someone at home and you were out there in the streets last summer proclaiming that Black Lives Matter, if you're someone who believes that it's finally time for a third Reconstruction in this country, it's finally time to oppose and end structural racism in Connecticut, then we've got to unite forces together and we've got to change the way laws and budgets are passed up in Hartford. And I would really love to hear from other folks just to chime in on this.
Why don't we go, Megan, tell us a little bit about, give us that immigrant perspective about this structural racism thing.
Well, we went to a public hearing at the legislature to ask our lawmakers to create a more progressive tax system. And I think we had 300 people testify. And one thing that we heard from legislators, some legislators said, well, you know, I'm in Guilford, Connecticut, and why should I be giving more and more and more to the city of New Haven and for the people in New Haven? You know, basically they're saying that folks are asking for another handout. And what we did during that hearing is we really changed the conversation, because it's not about, nobody is asking for a handout. Like you said, people are asking for their work to be valued. People are asking for their work to be recognized. They're asking for an equal opportunity that has been taken away from them, right? This is a real conversation about who is creating the wealth in Connecticut. Like you said, we need to talk about how the wealth has been created on the backs of enslaved people and formerly enslaved people and immigrant people. We are talking about a tax system that exacerbates the racial wealth gap. We have a racial wealth gap in Connecticut that was created historically by slavery, by redlining, by discrimination. And our tax system is only making the wealthy wealthier and the poor poorer. So the amazing thing is that when we spoke with the legislature, we could really expose these ideas that, oh, working people want a handout from the wealthy. And we got to say, no, it's the opposite, in fact. The poorest people in Connecticut are paying 23% of their income in state and local taxes. The 1% are paying about 7.5% of their income in state and local taxes. So working people are subsidizing the billionaires, the super rich in this state. Let's get it straight. Oh, Jesse, you're on mute.
Yes, that's exactly it. The wealth has been built upon the backs of a hard-working people. Poverty, a businessman once told me, poverty makes profits. We make money off the poor. Who do you think owns all those slumlord houses? Who do you think charges those overprices in the supermarkets and stuff? Yes, yeah. Norma, I think you started off saying you came from California or Oregon. Could you give us a out-of-state West Coast perspective over here? Because my feeling is everything we're talking about today, Connecticut is no different than New York, New Jersey. I'm in Florida today, Florida, Alabama, Texas, California, Oregon, Wyoming. If you're poor, if you're black and brown, if you're LGBT, this is the same thing everywhere. So could you give us when you came to Connecticut, did you say, hey, it's different here?
Well, no, I think you're right, Jesse. It is the same in terms of, I'm just going back to the point around really the root of this is around the disinvestments in these public services. So when we think about how do we solve them, and the plan that Recovery for All has is around that, investing in the public services that are gonna change systems that then go out, where people are interacting and engaging in. And so that's the way that we fight back. One of the themes of our campaign and one of our champions, Gary Winfield, said equity requires revenue, right? Because we kept on hearing this equity and equity here and equity there. And even the governor and other legislators adopted that language. But unless there's revenue behind it, really it's all talk. And it's the same here in Connecticut as in every other state. Unless there's real investment and real structures that are going to sustain that revenue, there is no change. There will be no change. Right now, we were blinded a little bit because of the federal money that came in, where there is, a little bit more money, but that's in any regular budget year, that might have been, it might be a good budget, but we know that come like 2-3 years, all that money is going to be gone and we're going to be in the same place. So to really fight, if we really want racial justice, we need economic justice. We need well-funded schools. We need well-funded healthcare. We need workers' protections. We need all those services to be funded long-term. There's been many, many years of disinvestment. And so we know that it's not going to be a 2-year fight, a 4-year fight. We need to change it long-term. And yes, there's other programs, maybe in other states that are doing maybe ahead of us in some pieces, but at the end of the day, it is around that. It is around funding and making that long-term investment. If we really want equity, and if we really want to fight against racism, that's one of the ways that we could start.
Excellent. And Pastor Wade, I'm gonna ask you to weigh in on this specific piece. In the state of Connecticut, the Supreme Court of our state passed down a decision in January 2018 that children in Connecticut, all children, do not have the right to an equitable or high quality education. The Supreme Court said adequate access, that's enough. Can we have a moral, like this is the example to me, like we can't turn to the courts. I can't turn to the governor. It's this whole idea for coalition. But this is that spiritual thing. Can we be, and Christians are not the only ones who are compassionate and caring, and you don't even have to have faith to be a caring and passionate person. But our Islamic brothers, our Jewish brothers, our Buddhists, our Hindu brothers and sisters, they also believe it. But can we be a moral state when we have a Supreme Court that passes down a ruling that says you don't need to be equitable for all our children? Give me the tough one, sir.
So let me say it like this. For me, everything revolves around. So from the founding of this nation, there has been this language that some folks, they are not entitled to the full rights of what it means to be a citizen. And so even when we talk about the 13th Amendment, the changing, freeing slaves, and the bottom line was that was just enough of freedom, but also close enough to help people to understand you're still not us. You're still not us. Still not like us. And so here we are in 2021, when you bring up critical race theory, bring up revenue, when you bring up schools, bring up housing, that language is still there. But now it's starting to be reversed in such a way. In other words, when you think about critical race theory, what is the conversation? I don't want my child being told who they should be. But that's the history of this country as it relates to Black and brown people, right? So there's a failure as it relates to critical race theory about the truth, about wanting to know the truth. Then when we talk about revenue, what is the language? Why should a wealthy person give up his wealth that he has earned? That's not fair. But you had a whole race of people who were brought over here in a boat, and as far as we can tell, was never made whole, never received the 40 acres. You understand what I mean? Was never made whole, but you look at that group and say you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, when in reality, most of the wealth that we see in Connecticut is legacy wealth that traces all the way back to some of those things that went on way back when. So you didn't earn nothing. Black folks provided the wealth for you because they did all of the work, right? You sat on the porch and drank lemonade. But now your argument is, why should I have to pay for something that my ancestors did, right? And then when we think about the schools, it's the same thing. Well, we made you whole by allowing you to participate, be a part of the schools, but we don't believe that we should have to make you whole. And I think that's the standard argument that goes around. It doesn't matter what space that you're operating in, And so the role for us, again, at the end of the day, is to say that's morally not correct, that you have an obligation, just like you want for your family, you want your child to be made whole, and you don't want anybody to tell them what they can be or what they should be or how high they can climb. But that's only for your child. That's not necessarily for a race of people who their whole history, they've been told, you're not this, you'll never get this, you'll never maintain this, be happy about it, that you're here. I think our challenge is to say the same things that you want for your child, Black and brown folks want for their child. In the same way that you got a hand up, is only right now that Black and brown folks have a legitimate, opportunity to be a part of the fabric and the fiber country. And that's not an individual thing. Let me say it like this, because I don't want people to think that they're not some Black and brown people who have succeeded. I think most of us in this room, have succeeded, done some things, but it's a systemic thing. It's not just, you can't, oftentimes they point and they'll say, oh, you got Oprah and you got so-and-so. To me, that's sad, because if you can count on your finger the number of Black people that you perceive to be successful, then that already makes my argument. You understand what I'm saying? Because you shouldn't be able to tell. I'll end it with that.
That's it. And who you put in the chat box about the funding disparities between our schools. And for me, being an educator, I'm well versed in the understanding that it's not that we spend the same dollars. The struggle is to get the same services. So the same dollars for New Haven as Darien is not equity. We want to have the same ratio to special education, to literacy personnel, to nurses, counselors. That's what we want. But I think pretty soon Harry's going to pop in on us, and say, hey guys, and we're going to hear the music. So give us like a sum up for our day today and our challenge.
I think I only have a few seconds, so I'll put it this way. We're living through a truly unique moment in history, once in a generation. In the next 10 years, everybody knows the world is going to change. The question is, in what direction? How's it going to change? Who's going to have the power to shape the future? At Recovery for All, we believe if hundreds, thousands, millions of working people in Connecticut unite together, we can change the state for the better. We can build a truly more equitable society, and we can change the balance of power, because that's really what we're talking about here, power. Right now, the balance of power is breaking against working people in Connecticut, and we've got to change it.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'm gonna roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going. Better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.